Quba. We're just going to go through some security stuff with you today, what you need to know. So if you haven't been to one of these events before, it's our stacked ByteSize brand, which is basically some topic around technology that we do in 15 minutes. So a really sort of quick intro to something that we want to talk about. But then if you want to know more, you can come to us afterwards, send us an email, send me a message, and we're happy to go into more detail. But this is really top level, getting into some topic. Today, we're talking about security. So what is security? In this context, we're talking about mainly web application security, because obviously we build web applications, but it's relevant to any sort of security, really. But Cloudflare say this, I won't read it to you, as you can read it yourself. But mainly the important word here is really practice, because you need to put in practice various things to make sure that you are secure. And if you just put them in and don't do anything with them, then that's not going to be very good. You're pretty much going to get hacked. So you need to have an ongoing procedure or policy that you practice to make sure you're secure. So at real top level, there's various layers. I'm not going to talk through all these, but basically this was built in the 1970s by ISO, and it's still accurate today. And it's basically, there's a number of layers to any sort of system. I think they put number one, the human layer, because that is the most important, because you can have anything underneath it, but if your human factor causes an issue, then anything below it is just pointless. So everything below that is more to do with the technology you've got in place. So for example, like a perimeter security is something outside, so maybe like a security camera or something like that. We go further down. We've got an endpoint, so if you've got an API, that kind of security layer, stuff like that. We've got more detail about these various layers later on, but we're not going through every one in detail, because to be honest, you could look on Google about that, and it would, I'm just going to bore you if I talk through all of them, but we've got some sort of tidbits about interesting aspects. I want to really touch on the human factor though, because like I said, that is most important. So whatever you have, if the people in your organization make a mistake, the rest of it falls away. As you can see at the top, human interaction or human mistakes cause 90% of all issues. So it doesn't matter what else you've got. If you make a mistake, that's going to happen. So we've just got some examples here of what you could do or what they can do wrong. So reusing passwords, or really weak passwords, is a really obvious one, but password sharing might not be so obvious. But if you just nip onto Teams and just share a password over there, that's insecure. Having insecure networks, so if you just go to the coffee shop and you've got the inner workings of your company open and you do it on a public Wi-Fi, again, really insecure. You might have policies in place, which we'll talk about in a sec, but if no one adheres to them, what's the point in having them? So it's a bit like having an insurance policy and doing nothing with it. Leaving your screen unlocked, and then people can just get on. And then more phishing, giving away information, that's more to do with if, rather than someone making a mistake, someone seeing something that they're given on a website, and then they inadvertently give away information. So how do we sort of mitigate against this? What's the best practice against this? Most important thing is the collective responsibility. So you might have an IT team or a security team. It's not just their responsibility. They might put it in place. Everyone is responsible for security across the company. But that's to ensure that they must be trained. So that's the responsibility of the management team, to make sure that they have in place training and they give them training. On a more specific level, an example might be to use a password manager, because I touched on passwords being shared. Use a password manager. Don't just have them on sticky notes. I've seen this happen. Sticky note on a laptop. Do not do that. Testing what you've got in place is really important to test. Don't just assume that it happens. And we did one a few weeks ago that I can talk about in a different time, but we did one to make sure that if something happens, can we mitigate against it? And then if you want to go really high level or deep into it, get an accreditation such as ISO 27001, which is a security accreditation. We could talk for days about this. And in fact, when you do a training course, it does take days to do that. So I won't go into that, but it is the industry standard for security. If we go a further layer down, what's some sort of attacks that might actually happen that is unrelated to sort of a human making a mistake? So some of the really common ones that you would see are a distributed denial of service, known as DDoS, basically. And that is where a bad actor will send a mass amount of traffic to a website and try and take it down. And we have this quite often. We have security in place for this, such as Cloudflare, which sits in front of websites, and we get alerts around this. What is really interesting about this is that people think that they only go for big websites. That isn't the case. And they also only think that they only happen with mass amount of traffic. That also isn't the case. So what will generally happen is that someone will put a small amount of traffic to see if it is noticed. If it isn't noticed, they will then ramp that up slightly more, and they will keep going until the point at which there's too much traffic and it will go down. So it's not just all in one. Similar to a brute force. Brute force is where you've got maybe a login form, and they just try and hack the password by just sending millions of different passwords. And that's why you want to have a secure password, because if it's easy, they'll crack that in minutes. And then the man in the middle is basically where they interact in between some things. So there's some kind of service sitting between, say, a website and your browser in between, and it will try and get the connectivity between it. How do we protect against these? I've already mentioned Cloudflare. So that's a firewall that sits in front of it, tracking all the traffic. Cloudflare in particular use AI to track that, and they know when a DDoS is happening, for example. Set up blocking rules and make sure you're blocking specific IPs, things like that. So there's lots more detail around this. And if you think that you are suffering from DDoS attacks, you think you're insecure, send me a message after. We can talk through this in more detail. Let's hand over to Jai now to talk about this stuff.
Cool, thank you, Ben. Yeah, so we're kind of heading down the layers. Yeah, one of the ways you might be attacked is through kind of bad actors installing software or programs onto your machines. We've all heard of computer viruses, which is a particular type of program that doesn't just kind of cause issues on one machine, but replicates itself and can, if you don't pick it up quickly, can sort of go across your whole kind of infrastructure. Ransomware is something that's become a big deal in the last few years, and that's where your files basically get locked up, encrypted, and the people who do it kind of charge you for the key, and that can be kind of thousands of pounds to get access to your files again. And malicious redirects is something that's just sort of cropping up more and more, where someone will tamper with your website so that it actually redirects to another website, for example, a gambling website or something of that ilk. So how can we protect against those things? Do you want to move on to the next slide, Ben?
Yep.
So yeah, running antivirus software, absolutely crucial. Make sure it's a good one, kind of commercial one, rather than just, free Avast or whatever it is. Make regular backups. If you've got a daily backup that's stored in a secure location, then a ransomware attack isn't really a big deal. But if it's been 3 months since your last backup, that kind of happened to a friend of mine. It was 3 months since they'd made a backup ransomware attack, and yeah, he had 3 months of work to redo. And the other thing is keeping everything up to date. So make sure that this applies to your servers, but also to your laptops and mobile phones and things. Make sure automatic updates are on, like your operating systems needs to be fully up to date, and turn on auto updates on your different bits of software. Next one. Vulnerability exploits. So these are more sort of developer focused. So the kind of development of the website application itself. So yeah, these are just some ways that that bad actors could exploit your website. Versus if data is sent unencrypted, so that means that yeah, anyone could read that data who's able to kind of pick up on your Wi-Fi. Ben was saying earlier about if you're in a cafe, but if someone's connected to the same Wi-Fi and data is sent unencrypted, they could pick that up, or just tap in the physical wire as well. Cross-site scripting is a JavaScript kind of thing where someone can create a link that essentially steals user data or does bad things on your website, and it can be through something really simple like a search form or something like that. SQL injection is similar, but is more to do with like the database. So they'll send a particular request. If your contact forms are not set up right, maybe they could even delete your whole database. That's a possibility. And then server-side request forgery. So that's when an attacker is able to gain access to an internal system through an external one. So yeah, that's about kind of making sure those connections between different systems are secure. We know that kind of websites are connected to a whole bunch of different internal systems these days. It's not just the website on its own. So how do we solve these things? Again, keeping everything up to date is the key. And especially in this case, third-party libraries. Make sure you signed up to updates, because if an exploit is discovered, it will be made public pretty quickly, and you kind of need to be on top of that and getting those updates installed. Encoding user input, using allow lists, not trusting anyone. These are basically all of the same category. It's like if the user can input data into your website, assume that it's going to be trying to do something bad to your website. So yeah, make sure that that only the data that's allowed is actually coming through, and it's all validated and encoded properly. Pen testing, that's when an external company comes in and tests your site and tries to hack it and sees what are the issues here, what are the possible attack vectors. It can be costly, but it is worth it. They'll pick up on a load of different issues, and you can figure out what are the most important ones to get sorted. Yeah, and it's definitely worth doing that regularly. And as a developer myself, I think the most important thing you can do is to support your developers and make sure that they have the time and the budget to be able to do these things properly. Because this is probably one thing where if there isn't enough time, corners will get cut. So yeah, make sure that they're properly supported. And then just a last little thing, a lot of applications now are cloud-based, and one of the benefits of that is that you can sort of offload some of this responsibility to a third party who has spent a lot of money making sure their stuff is secure. So if you've got SaaS products, so that might be a headless CMS or something like that, then yeah, I guess make sure that they are secure, but you can kind of give that responsibility over to them, and they've got teams of developers working on that. And the same applies to like infrastructure stuff as well. I hate the word serverless because there's always a server running a website, but the point is that you don't have to manage the servers, that they're automatically updated with the latest updates and stuff. So yeah, this brings a lot of benefits in terms of not having to worry about maintaining that stuff yourself. And I think back over to you, Ben, to finish off.
Yeah, thanks, John. So obviously it's kind of a whistle-stop tour of the 7 layers at the beginning, but from this, we're just with some conclusions that you might want to take away. So if you take away anything from this, in my opinion, it's that security is for everyone, not just the IT team. So if you're a small organization and you've just got a development team, it's not just their responsibility. If you're a massive organization and you've got thousands of people, it's not just the IT team. They put things in place, but everyone is responsible for it. Have a multi-layered defense strategy. Just don't have one thing, because if you only got one, if you're only securing against one attack, like Ji just talked about many different vectors there, you're open. So try and have a multi-pronged approach. The third one really can apply to anything that we talk about, but buy the best you can afford, really. So don't cheap out. It's almost like the analogy would be like cheaping out on the insurance, then having a car accident and then being like not being able to get a car in replacement. So buy the best you can afford. And also, like Jai's just alluded to in one of the other slides about helping the development team, make sure there's time budget allocated for training, so everyone knows what they need to be doing. So there's those takeaways, really. I'll stop sharing now, see if there's any questions in the chat. Let's have a look. I've got one from Matt, which I'll read out. How important is the role of education in strengthening website security? And what strategies can be employed to educate both teams and end users? I think I'll take that one, Jai, if that's right initially. Yeah. So, I mean, I've just said really that the education is the most important thing. Well, being responsible for it is the most important thing. So educating everyone what they need to do. In terms of the strategies to do that, I think you need to go a step earlier, really, and make sure you've got policies in place. So whether you've got a data security policy, a breach policy, all those kind of policies, make sure that they're signed off by management, and then make sure that everyone in the team knows them. So you can do this internally. So we can have, if it's a small company, internally talk through these, make sure everyone knows them. If you're a bigger company, you can get third parties to train you in this, such as ISO companies, stuff like that. So it's like with any other training, really. If you're training on a CMS platform or anything, really what works for your company, I would suggest. Another question about pen testing from Andy. I don't know if you want to take that one, Jai, about Qualys scans.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with Qualys scans specifically. I mean, there are scans that you can do like yourself, like, or as a development team, that they could look through. I think the if you look for the OWASP Foundation, they have like a top 10 kind of possible exploits. So I think that's, if you're sort of limited on budget, that's the place to go to say what are the biggest potential issues, and then kind of find tools that will tell you about that.
Yeah, I think I'll just pick up on Qualys because I've had experience with that. So tools like that are good in terms of you can have automated scanning and it will scan for stuff. But the problem with that is it thinks like a computer. So it basically has a list of exploits that it goes through. The advantage of a pen test is that it's actually got a human trying to break it, and it thinks in a different way that a computer might not. So although they are good and you might have like a monthly scan and it gives you this, it doesn't replace pen testing, in my opinion. You should really still have that. But yeah, a combination of both is probably the best. And clients that have the best results, I find, do a pen test like every 6 months or something, but then they have automated scanning in between. So a combination of both, really. Matthew has asked about the shift to remote working and what adjustments. Anything on that, or I can take it if you want.
I'll let you start.
Okay, well, I know from the point of view, so because we are about to go down the ISO route, I know some about this in terms of there's things that happen at home that would not normally happen in the office. So generally people at home will be on their own Wi-Fi, their own networks. They've also got other issues they might find in the house. So you need to have policies in place to cover that side of eventuality, whether that's having a managed desktop sort of scenario or a VPN. So when you're going on the, you're not just using your home Wi-Fi that might be insecure and your neighbor can get onto it. So it's about how do you, from home, ensure that people can connect to the important things securely. If just getting an email and stuff, probably fine. But if you're going onto servers, things like that, they can't just be going over their own internet and Wi-Fi. They need to be via VPN. So that's generally what I've seen as a shift from remote work. Matt, what is the most challenging security threat you had to deal with, and how did you manage it? So from my point of view, probably can't say exactly what it was because then we would give away what it was. But there was an issue where we had a vulnerability in Kentico that was allowing some nefarious items to be uploaded, shall we say. How we dealt with that is we fell back on our policy that we have, really. So we do have a policy for data breach. There wasn't actually a data breach in this scenario, but we got a team together. It's important to have an action plan which has a team that you go to and can escalate it. Got it together, which actually was me and Ji, if I seem to remember. So we were the team that got together and worked out what to do with it in terms of how do we get rid of it, how do we stop it from happening again. That was really to do with out-of-date software, which I was talking about earlier, in terms of a platform, actually, rather than sort of anything to do with the operating system or stuff. But really, you really need to start with your policies, have one that's secure, have one that is watertight that you can run through so that you can deal with it, and also test that policy. I know you were involved as well, Josh. I don't know if you want anything you want to.
The only thing I would add is I think the thing we learned there was the importance of isolating different applications from each other, so that they can, so that an attack on one application is not going to affect another.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've got a question outside of the chat, which I'll fire at you, Ji, which was with the increasing use of third-party services and APIs. Are there any sort of best practices that we or organizations should follow now, sort of going forward, that's different? Because I guess with the advent of cloud-based computing, I guess.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of that same what I was saying earlier, like don't trust anyone is a good start. The principle of least privilege, so basically restricting access as much as possible. So making sure if you're I suppose there could be two ways this is meant. One way might be that you are providing an API for other people from your website, and the other one is consuming another API. Just thinking about consuming another API, you kind of want to make sure that credentials for that are stored securely, that only the application itself is allowed to use it. And I think as well that you make sure you're stopping like unrestricted usage. So for example, if you've got a postcode lookup on your website, you're probably using an API in the background for that, and that's costing you, per lookup. But if you unrestrict that, if it's not restricted from the front end, then someone can just come and hammer your website and cost you a load of money on the API at the back end. So even though they've not got access to the API directly, they've got access to it through the front end of your website. So you need to make sure that is restricted.
We actually did inherit a site that did that. So we have seen a real world example of that happening. Another one that I've got outside chat was what is OWASP, and is it a good foundation for ensuring security? Is it right for small to medium sized businesses? So if anyone that doesn't know what OWASP is, it's kind of an organization, but it's like an open source organization that deal with anything to do with security, and they generally every year publish the top 10. So you can just Google that and you'll see the top 10 security flaws, and they sort of have a league table that changes every year. In my opinion, is a good foundation for ensuring security because it's like an industry standard, and a lot of companies ask for it if you're building towards OWASP. And you can actually, a lot of tools with development tools integrate with it now. So you can, for example, Visual Studio for .NET, you can have tools that integrate with the sort of OWASP top 10 and sort of do automated checks for things like that. The second part of the question, was it right for small to medium-sized businesses? It's right for any business. It doesn't differentiate between the size. If you're going to get cross-site scripting, that could occur on SME, or it could occur on a multi-billion-pound company. It doesn't make any difference. So, anything from you on that, Giles? Covered.
No, I think you've covered it there. Yeah.
Cool. I think I've covered. Oh, the final one that I've got. Oh no, there's one in the chat actually. Matt Jones just asked, was the development of AI pose a greater challenge? Security. So AI is also the big buzzword. Do you want anything on that, John? Will I just check the other questions I've got?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're still discovering that. I think the chances are yes, it potentially does, but I think like Ben said, because the biggest factor is the human factor, right? So yeah, whether it's AI that's sort of trying to get humans to act in a particular way, or whether it's another human, doesn't really matter. I think the sort of exploits and vulnerabilities and things like that come from that human factor are like remain the same. So it's possible that people might be more targeted. So AI might figure out what I don't know, what they might be able to figure out what bank you use for, somehow, and target you with phishing texts saying you've had a deposit in your Barclays account or whatever it is with a dodgy link. But the principles for dealing with that don't change. Yeah.
I also think you can flip the question around, the emphasis of the question, and say, does it pose a greater solution for website security? Because if you look at Cloudflare, I already said that earlier, so they use AI, so they are constantly, and they've been doing this for years, but they're constantly tracking all the traffic to a website. And by looking at trends using AI models, they can then know, well, this is an attack or not an attack, or is this valid traffic or not traffic? So as with any new technology, there's both sides to the coin, I guess. It's good and bad. So
yeah, good point.
I think it can do both. I think that's all the questions and all off my list. So if there's no more, thanks everyone for attending. Thanks, Jai, for helping me out. And I guess we'll see you at the next ByteSize event. So have a good day, everyone.
Cool.
Catch you in a bit.
Cheers. Bye.